Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to imagine for a moment that you are living in a house with many floors. But you spent your entire life in the basement. The basement is dimly lit, cramped, and filled with the echoes of problems. You can hear activity on the floors above, laughter, music, the sounds of celebration. But you believe these upper floors are fantasies, unreachable dreams, impossible realities. What if I told you tonight that you are indeed living in such a house, and that most of humanity has mistaken the basement for the entire building? What if I told you that there are dimensions of reality so magnificent, so abundant, so perfect, that they would seem like heaven itself to someone trapped in the basement of ordinary consciousness? Tonight I want to take you on a journey through the floors of this cosmic house. I want to show you the three primary dimensions of existence that you move through every day, often without knowing it. I want to reveal to you the 3D world of effects, the 4D world of causation, and the 5D world of pure being. And most importantly, I want to teach you how to consciously ascend from one to another until you live primarily in the penthouse of divine consciousness. Just yesterday, a woman came to me in tears. She said, "Neville, I've been studying these teachings for 5 years. I understand them intellectually, but my life hasn't changed. I still struggle with money, my health is deteriorating, and my relationships are a mess. What am I doing wrong?" I looked at this sincere seeker and immediately recognized her problem. I said, "My dear, you're trying to solve 3D problems with 3D thinking. You're attempting to rearrange the furniture in the basement instead of moving to a higher floor. You haven't truly understood that there are dimensions of reality where your problems simply don't exist." She looked confused. So I continued. Right now you're living primarily in what I call the 3D world, the world of physical effects, material circumstances, and apparent limitations. But there exists a 4D world, the world of imagination and assumption, where you can consciously create the causes that will reshape your 3D experience. And beyond that lies the 5D world, the realm of pure being, where you exist as the very consciousness in which all realities are possible. "But how do I access these other dimensions?" she asked. "By understanding that you're not trying to go somewhere else," I replied. "You're trying to realize where you already are. These dimensions aren't different places. They're different levels of consciousness, different ways of being aware. And consciousness can shift between them as easily as you can choose to focus on sounds in different rooms of your house." This woman learned to distinguish between these dimensions of reality. And within 3 months her entire life had transformed. Not because she changed anything in the 3D world directly, but because she learned to live primarily from the higher dimensions where transformation is natural and effortless. Let me explain these 3 worlds to you in detail, because understanding them will revolutionize not just your manifestation abilities, but your entire experience of existence. The 3D world is what most people consider to be the only reality. It's the world you perceive with your 5 physical senses, what you can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. It's the world of solid objects, linear time, cause and effect as understood by physics, and apparent limitation. In the 3D world, if you want more money, you must work harder or find better opportunities. If you want better health, you must exercise more or take medicine. If you want love, you must find the right person and convince them to care about you. Everything requires physical action, external cooperation, and often struggle against resistant circumstances. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in 3D consciousness, believing that this physical reality is the ultimate authority. They let their bank account determine how abundant they feel. They let their body determine how healthy they feel. They let other people's behavior determine how loved they feel. They are completely at the mercy of external conditions because they don't realize there are higher dimensions from which these conditions can be consciously created. Here's what they don't understand. The 3D world is not the cause of anything. It's purely a world of effects. Everything you see in the 3D world is the result of activity in higher dimensions. The 3D world is like the screen in a movie theater. It displays images, but it doesn't create them. The creation happens in the projection booth of consciousness. Now, the 4D world is the realm of imagination, assumption, and mental causation. This is where the real creative work happens. In the 4D world, you're not limited by physical laws or external circumstances. Here you can be anywhere, be anyone, have anything, experience everything. Time and space become fluid. Limitations dissolve. Impossibilities become possibilities. Most people glimpse the 4D world in dreams, daydreams, and moments of deep imagination. But they dismiss these experiences as just fantasy. They don't realize that the 4D world is actually more real than the 3D world because it's the dimension where all 3D experiences are created. When you consciously enter the 4D world through imagination, you're not escaping from reality. You're entering the workshop of reality. Every assumption you make in the 4D world, every scene you imagine, every feeling you generate becomes a cause that must produce corresponding effects in the 3D world. But here's the crucial point. Most people use their 4D faculties unconsciously. They imagine what they don't want, assume the worst about their situations, and feel the reality of their limitations. Then they wonder why their 3D world reflects struggle and lack. Let me tell you about a man who learned to use the 4D world consciously. He was a construction worker who had been injured on the job and told he would never work again. His workers' compensation was minimal. His savings were depleted, and his future looked hopeless from a 3D perspective. But this man understood something profound. He realized that in the 4D world of imagination, he could be completely healed, financially secure, and living his ideal life right now. So every day, he would consciously enter the 4D realm and experience himself as perfectly healthy and abundantly prosperous. In his imagination, he didn't just see himself healed. He felt the strength in his body, the confidence in his movement, the joy of physical vitality. He didn't just visualize wealth. He experienced the security, the freedom, the peace of mind that abundance brings. He made these 4D experiences so vivid and real that they became more compelling than his 3D circumstances. His doctors thought he was delusional. His family worried about his denial of reality. But he knew something they didn't know. He was creating his new reality in the dimension where all realities are born. Within a year, his body had healed in ways that medical science couldn't explain. Within 2 years, he had discovered a talent for real estate investment that made him wealthier than he had ever been as a construction worker. The 4D experiences he had been having in imagination manifested perfectly in his 3D world. Now, beyond both the 3D and 4D worlds lies what I call the 5D world, the dimension of pure being, the I Am consciousness. Your true identity is God experiencing itself as individual awareness. In the 5D world, you're not trying to get anything or become anything because you already are everything. You're not healing yourself because there's nothing wrong with you. You're not manifesting abundance because you are abundance itself. You're not seeking love because you are love expressing as individual consciousness. The 5D world is the realm of pure potential, infinite possibility, and absolute freedom. It's where you exist as the formless awareness in which all forms appear. It's your true home, your original nature, your deepest identity. Most people only glimpse the 5D world in moments of deep meditation, profound love, creative inspiration, or mystical experience. But it's actually the foundation of your being, the ground from which both your 4D imagination and your 3D experience arise. Here's the revolutionary secret. When you learn to live primarily from the 5D consciousness of pure being, both the 4D world of imagination and the 3D world of manifestation become effortless. You're no longer trying to create from limitation. You're expressing from infinite fullness. Let me share a story that illustrates what it means to live from 5D consciousness. A woman came to me who had been battling a serious illness for 7 years. She had tried every medical treatment, every alternative therapy, every manifestation technique. Sometimes she would improve temporarily, but the illness always returned. I said to her, "You're trying to heal yourself from the 4D world of imagination, which is good, but you're still operating from the assumption that you are a person who has an illness. You're trying to imagine yourself becoming healthy instead of recognizing that you are health itself expressing as individual consciousness. She didn't understand, so I explained. In the 5D world of pure being, illness is impossible, because there's nothing separate from perfect wholeness. You're not a body that has consciousness. You're consciousness that appears to have a body. When you truly know yourself as pure consciousness, the body has no choice but to reflect that perfection. I taught her to move beyond visualizing health and into being health itself, not imagining herself as a healthy person, but recognizing herself as the very consciousness in which the concept of health and illness appear as temporary experiences. This woman learned to identify primarily with her 5D nature as pure, perfect, eternal consciousness. From this identity, she didn't try to heal her body, she simply expressed her true nature, and her body naturally reflected that expression. Within 6 months, every trace of her illness had disappeared. Not through medical intervention, not through 4D visualization, but through 5D recognition of her true nature as perfect consciousness expressing perfectly. Now you might be wondering, how do these 3 dimensions relate to each other? How do you consciously move between them? Think of it this way. The 5D world is like the sun, pure, eternal, unchanging consciousness. The 4D world is like the atmosphere, where consciousness takes on the forms of thoughts, feelings, and imagined experiences. The 3D world is like the earth, where these atmospheric conditions manifest as physical experiences. When you're living primarily from 3D consciousness, you're like someone who only looks at the ground and wonders why it's sometimes sunny and sometimes cloudy. You see effects but not causes. You experience results but don't understand how they're created. When you develop 4D consciousness, you learn to look up and see the atmospheric conditions that create the weather of your experience. You realize you can influence these conditions through imagination and assumption. But when you awaken to 5D consciousness, you realize you are the sun itself, the pure awareness that illuminates all atmospheric conditions and all earthly experiences without being limited by any of them. The secret of conscious creation is learning to operate primarily from the 5D world of pure being, using the 4D world of imagination as your creative medium, and allowing the 3D world to naturally reflect your inner state. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Suppose you desire more money. From 3D consciousness, you focus on getting money through external means, working harder, finding new opportunities, cutting expenses. This often involves struggle, because you're trying to create the cause from the level of effects. From 4D consciousness, you imagine having money, feel the reality of abundance, and assume prosperity is yours. This is much more effective because you're working from the level of causation rather than effects. But from 5D consciousness, you recognize that you are the very abundance you seek. Money becomes not something you need to get, but something you naturally express as consciousness experiencing itself as abundance. The feeling of lack becomes impossible because you know yourself as the inexhaustible source of all supply. I knew a businessman who mastered this progression. When his company was failing, he initially tried to save it through 3D actions, cutting costs, working longer hours, desperately seeking new clients. These efforts only seemed to make things worse. Then he shifted to 4D consciousness and began imagining his business thriving. He visualized success, felt the reality of prosperity, and assumed his company was valuable and profitable. This helped, and he began to see some improvement. But the real transformation came when he accessed 5D consciousness and recognized himself as the very creativity and abundance that his business was meant to express. He stopped trying to save his business and started being the consciousness that creates successful businesses. From this 5D awareness, innovative ideas flowed effortlessly. Perfect opportunities appeared without struggle. The right people came into his life naturally. His business didn't just recover, it became more successful than he had ever imagined possible. But now the success felt natural and effortless because it was arising from his true nature rather than from desperate effort. Understanding these 3 dimensions also explains why some people manifest quickly while others struggle for years with the same desires. Those who manifest quickly are naturally accessing higher dimensions of consciousness. Those who struggle are trying to create from the 3D level of effects. It also explains why some manifestations feel forced and temporary, while others feel natural and permanent. When you create from 3D consciousness, you often have to maintain constant effort to keep your manifestations from dissolving. When you create from 4D consciousness, your manifestations are more stable but may still fluctuate with your mental state. But when you create from 5D consciousness, your manifestations feel natural and permanent because they're expressions of your true nature rather than acquisitions added to your identity. Now, how do you practically develop consciousness of these higher dimensions? How do you learn to live primarily from 4D and 5D awareness rather than being trapped in 3D limitation? First, you must develop what I call dimensional awareness. Throughout your day, ask yourself, which dimension am I operating from right now? Am I reacting to 3D appearances? Am I consciously using my 4D imagination? Am I aware of my 5D nature as pure consciousness? Most people are unconscious of which dimension they're operating from. They slip between dimensions randomly, creating chaotic and inconsistent results in their lives. But when you become conscious of these levels, you can choose to operate from the dimension that serves your highest good. Second, you must practice dimensional shifting. When you catch yourself trapped in 3D consciousness, worried about circumstances, reacting to appearances, feeling limited by external conditions, consciously shift to a higher dimension. Move from 3D to 4D by engaging your imagination. Instead of focusing on what appears to be wrong, imagine what you want to experience. Feel it, see it, hear it in your mind until it becomes more real than your current circumstances. Move from 4D to 5D by recognizing your true nature. Instead of trying to imagine yourself having or becoming something, recognize that you are the consciousness in which all having and becoming takes place. Rest in the awareness of your own being. Third, you must cultivate what I call dimensional loyalty. Make a commitment to live primarily from the highest dimension you can access. When 3D appearances try to pull you down into reactive consciousness, remain loyal to your 4D vision or your 5D awareness. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of this work, because the 3D world is constantly demanding your attention and reaction. But every time you choose to respond from a higher dimension rather than react from 3D consciousness, you strengthen your ability to live from elevated awareness. Let me share one final story that illustrates the power of living from multiple dimensions simultaneously. A young woman came to me who wanted to be a professional singer, but had been rejected by every record label and talent agency she approached. From a 3D perspective, her dream seemed impossible. But I taught her to operate from all 3 dimensions consciously. In the 3D world, she continued to practice her craft, perform at small venues, and take practical steps to improve her skills. But she didn't rely solely on 3D actions. In the 4D world, she spent time every day imagining herself as a successful recording artist. She felt the reality of performing on big stages, signing autographs, and hearing her songs on the radio. She made these imaginal experiences so vivid that they became more compelling than her current circumstances. But most importantly, she accessed 5D consciousness and recognized herself as the very creativity and artistic expression she was trying to manifest. She stopped trying to become a successful singer and started being the consciousness that expresses through music. From this 5D awareness, she realized that her value as an artist wasn't dependent on external recognition or commercial success. She was already the perfect expression of musical consciousness, whether anyone else recognized it or not. This shift in consciousness changed everything. Her performances became more authentic and powerful because she was expressing her true nature rather than trying to get something. Her music became more original and inspired because it was flowing from source consciousness rather than imitative effort. Within 18 months, she was discovered by a producer who was drawn to the unique quality of presence she brought to her music. She was signed to a major label not because she had finally convinced someone of her worth, but because she had become so authentic an expression of her true nature that her talent was undeniable. You see, when you learn to operate from all three dimensions consciously, miracles become natural. The 3D world becomes not a prison but a playground. The 4D world becomes not an escape but a workshop. The 5D world becomes not a distant goal but your recognized reality. So tonight I want you to begin exploring these dimensions of your own consciousness. Notice where you typically operate from. Practice shifting between levels of awareness. Begin to identify primarily with your 5D nature as pure consciousness while using your 4D imagination to create and allowing your 3D world to reflect your inner state. Remember, you're not trying to escape the 3D world. You're trying to master it by operating from higher dimensions. You're not trying to live only in imagination. You're trying to use imagination consciously to create better physical experiences. You're not trying to disappear into pure being. You're trying to recognize pure being as the foundation from which you can create and experience anything. The 3D world is your canvas, the 4D world is your paintbrush, and the 5D world is the artist. When you know yourself as the artist, the painting becomes a joy rather than a struggle. You are multidimensional beings temporarily focused on one level of experience. Expand your awareness. Claim your full heritage as consciousness itself expressing through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The basement of 3D limitation is not your home. The creative workshop of 4D imagination is available to you. The penthouse of 5D pure being is your true residence. Which floor will you choose to live on? The choice is yours, and the choice determines everything about your experience of life. Thank you and good evening. This is Best of Lectures. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.